All right. Okay, we are live. Welcome, Laura and Baz, to the Inspired Idiot Show. So, before we kind of jump into why I brought you guys here specifically, I wanted to just kind of introduce the idea behind this show because I think I explained to Laura before that it's kind of my belief that every person who has ever been an entrepreneur or kind of even just worked on building their dream life was at one point nothing more than an inspired idiot, somebody who knew they wanted to do things differently, had no idea what they were doing, but they were committed to just kind of figuring it out as they go. And I think in my experience, every person who has ever dared to go after a big goal knows that feeling of being an inspired idiot. And so I wanted to start by just welcoming you guys to the show. Thanks for hopping on with me. The big reason that I wanted to talk with you guys was Laura and I had a conversation previously about her experience of being a police officer and experiencing that burnout. And now that's what you guys have basically dedicated your careers to is helping people with that burnout. So I wanted to just kind of start by welcoming you guys to the show and just get a little bit of a background on what made you guys so passionate about burnout that you decided to not only focus on it for your career, but focus on it together as a team.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us. It's really great to be here. And for the listeners, Barry and I, we're a husband and wife team. So if there is any bickering, then that is probably why. Okay, so we'll just get that out there from the outset. Um, it's a really interesting story because, as you said, Kelsey, my background is I'm a former police officer and counter-terrorism intelligence officer. And I was actually medically retired from the force 12 years ago next month, which is just crazy to think that. And that's because I have a diagnosis of bipolar and OCD. And it just got to the point where I just couldn't do my job anymore. And so that's when we were Inspired Idiots and we decided to start our business. Okay. And then about 5 years into running the business, that's when I hit burnout. So I didn't even know burnout was a thing. So there's us running the business, everything's going great. And then it was 2017, that's when I hit burnout. And my burnout was so severe that I was completely catatonic. I couldn't even watch TV, get dressed. Barry even had to make me a cup of tea, which is just, I never want to be there again. And yeah, and we almost lost the business because of it. So it was at that point that we decided that right now we need to dedicate our lives to this and to business owners. Um, so that's kind of like my brief background. Baz, did you want to go into yours? Because it's a little bit different.
I've got over 30 years of experience within the health and wellness industry. I started in the leisure industry, and then I met Lars, and then she started costing me a lot more money, so I had to get a job that paid me better. So I joined the prison service, and I spent 3 years walking on hands looking after the prisons, but I still had that burning desire to do health and wellness. So I specialised as a PTI within the prison service, so physical training instructor working in the gymnasium, and heading up the wellbeing department in the establishment I worked at. I was teaching the prisoners, personal trainers, sports therapists, and just anything to do with health and wellness. And then 7 years into being a PTI, Loz got medically retired, and I thought, do I spend the rest of my days with a full-time career in the prison service, or do I jump ship, join up with Loz, and then see where this journey takes us? And it was a very brave decision to do it, and literally we've been riding this roller coaster ever since. And we started off just looking at the physical health of people, how they look, getting the six pack, getting them ready for the beaches and the bikinis and whatever. But there was we saw these transformations, and we was like, they're still having the same conversations about themselves, still having that hatred conversation, didn't like what they see. So we started looking into mental health, and especially with Loz's bipolar and so forth. And we started opening the business up there, but there was another gap in the market which we weren't tapping into, and a lot of other people weren't, and that was our emotional health. So we look at emotional health, our mental health, and as well as our physical health. And this is where this all started from. This is how we're growing the business now.
And I hear a lot of people will say to us, Kelsey, they'll say, oh, do you deal with people in corporate, or do you deal with, high achievers and, this sort of thing? And my answer is always no. We work with founders, and we work with business owners because I feel that there's not enough support for people like us. You know, we are the backbone of any country because we are putting the work in, we're helping people. And so many people have so many talents. Like Kelsey, you have such an amazing gift, right? And it would be an absolute travesty if you burnt out and couldn't do that. So we love to say that we support the people that serve the people, right? And so for us, that's why we're so passionate about business owners being able to do their passion and, you know, deliver their talents to help others.
Yeah, that's actually something I wanted to ask you guys a little bit about more because for me, I felt like when I made that shift from being an employee to being an entrepreneur, it does become kind of a very like spiritual journey in a way. Like you almost have to become a very self-reflective person, and all of a sudden it's like you need to learn about yourself in a whole different way. And I think part of that is, like you said, that there's so many more resources and there's just so much more structure around the employee life of like climbing the ladder. It's a lot more straightforward. So when people make that leap of like, I think I'm going to step out of this and I'm going to try to figure out how to build something for myself, all of a sudden you just feel like you're completely in it alone. So do you find that that's something that is really common with the people that you work with, is that they feel alone and kind of overwhelmed?
Yeah. So, sorry, did you want to go
I
first?
was going to say, within over here in the UK, if you're working for someone, you get sick pay, you get holiday pay, you get time to take away from work. But when you're a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, you're in the trenches, and you take time off, you don't get paid. You take time off, your clients are not coming to see you. You take time off, and you can see the business starting to go down. And it's about finding that balance, and we want to come in and help people find that balance and find the structure to run their business and live the life they want.
And it's really interesting you say that because a lot of people will have come from corporate and they have burnt out and they've decided this is not a life for me. Great. I absolutely love it, right? But then there is a different mentality to being employed versus self-employed. And I definitely found that, you know, very quickly from leaving the police force. And what you'll tend to find is that they'll carry on in the same notion, you know, for maybe a few years, but they'll still have that old identity of the burnout hanging around. And what will happen is that's when burnout number two will happen, when they're maybe 2 to 5 years into their business, because they haven't quite defined this whole difference between, you know, employment and self-employment. Maybe because we've got something to prove, or, you know, we're a perfectionist or something like that. So I definitely find there is something within that there.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that in our last conversation, that it very often is around that like 3 year mark into entrepreneurship. Why do you guys
Yeah.
think, like just based on what you've seen with your clients, why do you think that is kind of the sweet spot where people really start to burn out in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And this is, I can only comment from what I've experienced and from, you know, what I've seen with my clients. But I don't know about anybody that started a business before. It's great. It's so much fun and it's really new and exciting. And, you know, we probably are really successful to start with. We're doing everything we possibly can to get it off the ground. And then we start to work more and we start to work more. And the business grows and it becomes this monster. And you have to dedicate everything to this thing because it consumes everything. And what happens is, slowly but surely, we start to lose our identity. We start to lose who we are as a person. And I know for me, I became Rock Solid, which is our business name. That's all. That's all I talked about. That's all I thought about. That's what I dreamt about. Because you have this thing that you want to build, and it is literally because we put everything in it. And it is usually we've just found that's the sweet spot of like 2 to 5 years as to when it happens, and as the business kind of slowly beats you down, basically, and it becomes almost the prison. You know, you built it to be free, but you became its prisoner.
It's that transitional phase, I think, where we grow the business, and we're in that transitional phase where we haven't got the funds to employ people to take the workload off us, but we need that because the business, we can't do all the work ourselves. So we're in that limbo phase where We need to transition to level up, but we haven't got the funds and the finances to do it, or the resources to do that. So it's that pushing through to get through, or managing the time differently.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and everybody's businesses are kind of unique in how they grow. Like how somebody is scaling a marketing agency is going to look different than how somebody is trying to scale, a ghostwriting business or financial services. So how do you guys kind of approach that with people when business structures look different?
I think it doesn't matter what the business structure looks different. We need to look at their identity and how they see themselves. First of all, we need to look at getting them to accept what's going on, accept the situation that they're in, and then we work from the inside out.
It's so interesting because that's a really good question, because everybody's business model is so different. And, we work with scientists, we work with people in social media, we work with researchers, we work with biotechnicians, we work with people in, did I say finances, accountancy, and it's so different. But the one thing that's the same is them. Like, you are your business. And what we need to do is we need to understand that you are not your business at the end of the day. And we have to almost get them to just take their little, grip away from their business a little bit, to start to step into something that, they want to create, so that it's a lot easier for them, basically. So it doesn't matter for me, the business structure, because it's all about the person. The person who is a workaholic, who feels guilty for taking rest. Everybody feels the same. They experience it the same in terms of those thought processes. I can't switch off at night. Oh, I can't take a holiday, or, hashtag business owner life, LOL, what's a good night's sleep kind of thing. It's all the same narratives that are coming up. So the common denominator is that one person.
Right. Well, and I imagine too that now with like how many people are taking their businesses online and how much emphasis there is on like personal branding and, you need a personal brand. I think that what I've seen is that really, really blurs the line between your business being separate from you. Because if you're building a personal brand and you're always putting out content about your business and, building in public, as people say, I've experienced that where like I feel like, okay, the most authentic way for me to share my journey is to just tell my story online. But then where is that distinction between me and my life and my business?
So, so true. And here's the thing, and this is why we love serving business owners, because there's such a taboo. Who wants to buy from a burnt out business owner, right? Because that's what they'll be thinking. No one wants to buy from me. I can't let this mask down. I'm going to look weak. No one's going to buy from me, that kind of thing. So usually when people come to us, it's in secret, right? And I know sometimes there's a lot of people watching our stuff on LinkedIn, Instagram, and they won't comment. And so that's why we can't get tied to things, because people don't necessarily want to admit it in an open forum. But I know when we first started, we literally showed everything, about us, about what we did. And I was very honest in terms of how I was feeling, because we were in that kind of space where I feel we could have done that, but you do have to learn to have time for yourself when you're not necessarily posting everything online. And I think as we've got more mature in our business, there's a lot more stuff that Baz and I do that we don't necessarily put online nowadays. We just kind of like to keep it for ourselves, if that makes sense.
It's having those boundaries. It's like you don't let somebody come in your front garden and play around. You have your garden fence around there. You have your boundaries. And it's the same with social media. You don't let them see everything that's going on in your world. Let's have a little bit of your boundaries set out. And that's one of the things we work with. Finding these boundaries. Let's stick to these boundaries. We don't let anyone come and play in our world.
Yeah.
We're invited to come in, but we don't let them in all the time.
Yeah, I'm really glad you guys brought that up, because that was a really big driver for me in this brand, in like the name Inspired Idiots. Is I think that a lot of people have these goals of like, I want to work for myself. I want to be financially free. I want to build a life that I actually want to wake up every day and live. But then the more content I see online, the more I sometimes feel frustrated because you see a lot of people's highlight reels. You see the wins, you see people talking about how, my business got to seven figures and it was easy. And it's really easy to look at other people's success and perceive it as like, well, what am I doing wrong? Like I'm getting this wrong because this doesn't feel easy to me. So for me, a really big motivator for wanting to do this content is to kind of just show people a little bit of that behind the scenes of like, everybody has felt like an inspired idiot. Everybody has had moments where, maybe they just didn't share this, but everybody's had
Mm,
epic
yeah.
failures and burnout. And like, I think it's important to show that side of it, because if you go into entrepreneurship thinking that, you're comparing yourself to these people who are getting big wins, and you don't see the big failures or all the work and the sleepless nights and stuff that went into that. For me, it's not about glorifying the grind and the failures and the hard work, but it is about showing it so that people can see the full picture and know that when you feel like you're failing, you're not alone. And the
Yeah.
people that you see ahead of you who you perceive as successful have so many failures and setbacks and periods of burnout that they just didn't share.
And do you know what? This is the exact reason why I burnt out, Kelsey. It was because I was too focused on everybody else, what they were doing, how they were successful. Oh, they're earning 10K a month. Why am I not doing that? They've got thousands of views. Why have I not do that? So then I started to chase their version of success. And one of my coaches said to me, they actually said one question that really made me stop and think. And they said, Loz, what is your version of success? What does it mean to you to be successful? And in that moment, I was like, do you know what? I actually haven't defined that. But what I am doing is chasing everybody else. And I think it's so important that we need to hold our heads when it comes to running a business and really define who am I, what are my values, and what's my version of success, and not let our heads be spun. I know one of my triggers now, if I start looking at everyone else and going, oh, oh my gosh, they've got so many views, or, they look like, I know I'm like, whoa, I need to step back because this is going down a road that I don't want it to go down.
So important that you find your own version of success. I spoke to two different people a few years back. One was a millionaire. I asked him that question: "What is your definition of success?" And he said, when I become a billionaire, that is my definition of success. I've made it when I got my £1 billion." I asked somebody else who he wasn't a millionaire. He was coming from job to job to job. I said, "What's your definition of success?" He goes, "I wake up every morning and put my feet on the ground." And it's something else. When you can define what success means to you. It doesn't have to be a billion or million followers on social media. It doesn't have to be £1 million in the bank. It could be just, I wake up every morning and put my feet on the ground. And he knows every single day he wakes up, he feels successful.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of a story I saw recently about like I think it's an old story, like the banker and the fisherman. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but
No.
it's like I don't know where this originated from, but it's a story of like a banker sees a fisherman come in with his haul of the day, and he's got a few fish, like enough to feed his family, and gives them to his friends. And the banker says, "Why didn't you stay out there longer and get more fish?" And he says, "Oh, because I like to just get enough for, my community, and then I go have dinner with my wife, and then I go and I meet my friends at the pub and we have wine, and then I do it again tomorrow." And the banker goes, "No, no, no, you're doing this all wrong. You need to stay out there longer so you can bring in more fish, so you can make more money, so you can get another boat. And then you can eventually keep doing that, hire more people. You'll have a whole enterprise of boats. And then you can eventually sell the business." And then the fisherman says, "Yeah, okay, what do I do then?" And the banker says, "Well, then you can, go home early and have dinner with your wife and go hang out with your friends." And then, so the moral of the story is know when you have enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm a strong believer that you'll always have enough for today.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a good way to think about it.
Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to
yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Focus on the being real present in this moment. I've got enough, I've got enough money in my pocket for what I need while I'm on this call with you. I've got nothing in my pocket. I don't need any money at the moment.
Everything I need. You know, not to go obviously down too much of a spiritual route. I don't know, but even in the Lord's Prayer, it says, "Give us this day our daily bread," not our monthly bread, our social enterprise. That's such a powerful story, and you know, it sounds like when the banker sounds like so many people online. Oh, you don't want to be doing this. You need to be doing that. And this fisherman is like, well, actually, this is enough for me. I'm okay with that. And if you are new to business and you can be quite fresh and vulnerable, those sort of signs and that kind of pressure can really turn someone's head.
What about our builder who done our roof for us? And I said to him, when you plan on retiring? He goes, I already am. And I said, what do you mean by that? He goes, if I don't want to work today, I don't have to work today. If I want to work today, he works a lot of hours and he works really hard. But he goes, if I want to go on holiday, I can. If I want to go and take tomorrow off, I can. So I'm retired already. And I thought that was a really interesting way to see this entrepreneurship, running your own business. You're your own boss. Never say, I do it when. Facing that false reality of life that we are showing so much on social media. I do it when I've got the minute. Live as you want to live.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up. That actually reminds me of a definition. Like what I heard a few months ago was the definition of abundance is having the ability to do what you need to do when you need to do it. That's all it is. So if you think about it like that, I have the ability today to, if I need to go buy food because my fridge is empty, I can do that. If I need to take a few hours off because my mom needs help with something, I can do that. But I think when people think of abundance, they think of like, I need more. I need to be able to save for a rainy day. I need to, have enough assets that I can be investing. I think entrepreneurs tend to think 5 steps ahead because I think a lot of us kind of live in the prepare for the worst case scenario type of thinking. And I think in some ways, that can be seen as a good thing to be a 5 steps ahead thinker. But I think most of our brains, as you guys probably know, tend to lean negatively. So when you're always thinking 5 steps ahead and you're always planning for like what you need next, it's very easy to get caught up in always feeling like you don't have enough, which I think then really leads you to lean into that I will be happy when ...
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And this when never happens, and I think there's so much sensationalism, around some of the business world about, what you've got to be doing and what you've got to be achieving and what you've got to be learning and this kind of stuff. And I think if you can really get clear on what's your version of success for you, who it is you serve, and what you're doing for them, everything usually comes naturally. Some of our best marketing has come from when I've gone, do you know what? I'm going to forget all the marketing. I don't care. I don't care what you've told me. I'm just going to do what I feel, because we all know how to speak to our audience, especially if we've been there, right? I know what I've been there. And a lot of the posts that I post are about myself and I'm talking to myself, right? But it's just that they resonate. So I think, really getting in touch with that is such a game changer for you in terms of staying connected to your purpose and keeping your head.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, actually, the topic of like feeling. Like, I'm just going to go with what I feel is best, or I'm just going to go with my gut, because I have found that that's a very almost like controversial topic in entrepreneurship, whether you should honor and listen to your feelings or whether you should have the, Alex Hermosi mentality of fuck your feelings, stick to the plan. Your feelings are going to sabotage you, just go with logic. So what are your guys' thoughts on that? Because this is a very divisive topic in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I love it. Do you want to go?
Yeah, if you're in a happy place and you're having happy feelings, run with it, because happy feelings create happy results. And if you're in a positive mindset at that time, that's when you do your best results. When you're in a negative mindset and you've got negative chatter, we need to freeze everything. And never a good response comes from a negative mindset. So if you're in a positive mindset, feel your move, fly with it, run with it. But as soon as you start having the negative chatters, we need to pause any decision making and sort out the inner language first and then move.
I've not heard about the whole like screw your feelings and stuff like that. I've not heard of that before, actually. So it looks like I need to check that out and obviously write a rant post. But it's a really good question, and a lot of us have gone into business because we want to solve a problem for somebody, right? And that's what we want to do. And I think in order to be able to start your business, as you say, Inspired Idiots, you need to be able to tap into that. And that's the feeling part, because that's the thing that lights you up. You're passionate about it, right? So you harness that, and then you attach a strategy to it, right? And I think where Alex Hormozy might be coming in with this is when you start to think, oh, this isn't going very well. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to try this venture. I'm going to try this venture. I'm going to try this venture. I'm going to try this. And you become everything but nothing. And people have no idea what you're talking about. You might be doing, for example, copywriting 1 minute. Then, I do algorithms the next minute. And then, I know, I'll do YouTube videos the next minute and tell people how to do that. People get confused. And I think this might be where he's coming from. Yeah.
When you run on fear, you start chasing everything. You're like a Labrador trying to chase everything from the garden.
The man who chases 2 rabbits never catches any, right?
You've made that one up.
No, I didn't. I always say that one, Baz, you just don't listen to me. But yeah, and I know I've done this when business has not been going very well, which it won't. Newsflash, business won't always go smoothly, right? It's very easy to go, right, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to pivot, especially if you're entrepreneurial as well, because you want to try new things. But the problem is you end up confusing your audience and you confuse yourself. So I do believe that, yes, you need to be intuitive in terms of what it is you're creating and, what it is you're doing, but then build the strategy and stick to it. Like for us, I'm very firm. Business owners, burnout, that's what we're talking about. Because you start talking about lots of other things, people are going to get confused. There's something that Rory Vaden talks about called Sheehan's Wall. And Sheehan's Wall is basically a wall that once you penetrate that wall, you can then start talking about anything. So if you look at someone like Gary Vaynerchuk, he spoke about wine, right? He got big with wine. And then what's happened is people, he's a wine guy. Now he's known, he's broken through Sheehan's Wall and he can start talking about lots of other things. Brené Brown was all about vulnerability. She's broken through that wall. Now she can talk about other things. Until you are properly known, I believe, in the thing that you do, you have to stick with it, right? And hold your nerve when things don't seem to be going right.
It's longer than you think. Because you look at someone like Venus and Serena Williams, we don't see all of those 20 odd years or 15, 20 years of them training to be tennis players. We just see them walking onto the Wimbledon and winning slams. It's all this work in the background.
And then it's so just talking about back to that. So then it's very much for me, it's like you got that strategy and then you go, right, I want to get people onto my program. I'll try this marketing method, but we're still talking about burnout. I'd like to, sort of, I don't know, talk about the podcast, but it's still, do you know what I mean? So you have different marketing methods, but you're still staying firm to what it is you're serving. I know that was a long-winded, but that would be my take on that anyway.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think you guys touched on something really important there, that there's a difference between like going against your values and your integrity versus just feeling discomfort. Because I think a lot of people, like you said, you get into entrepreneurship, it feels fun and exciting at first, and then you might hit the first period where things feel really hard, you feel uncomfortable, sometimes it's just growth. And people probably are most likely to pivot or to maybe even give up entirely when they're going through that discomfort of like, this doesn't feel how I thought it would feel, or it's not growing as fast as I thought it would grow. And then that discomfort just becomes a reason for them. Like we try to run from the discomfort, right? So some people might run back to the 9 to 5, or they might pivot and be like, I need to do something else. Do you find that with the clients you guys work with, like, do you find that a lot of people do kind of try to avoid that discomfort, or is it more like they burn out because they're just relentlessly pushing through it?
But most of them relentlessly pushing through it. And then is this thing that creeps up behind you. And like, I'll have a rest at the weekend. I'll have a rest Monday. I'll take a day off next week. And keep pushing, which is not a bad thing. When we are setting up a business, you do need to strive forward, but we just need to be mindful of this thing called burnout. It's creeping up behind you, and it's going to keep you in the back. It's like with Loz. She woke up at midnight one morning. She was like hysterically crying, and that's when burnout hit Loz at midnight. And so we just got to be really mindful of our energy, where we're giving it, how we're sharing it, how much energy we're putting out. We have to recuperate that energy at some point to keep moving forward, to keep pushing, keeping that resilience nice and high.
Yeah. And that's where I think support comes in, because growth isn't a solo journey, right?
You've got to find your tribe.
It really is. And, you know, it's so important to be able to have that, but have business owners that you can, and people that have got the same values, that you can be okay with sharing. Do you know what? I'm having a really tough week. You know, I've got some really close friends that are business owners, and, you know, if I'm having a tough time, I'll be like, I'm really struggling. And they'll be like, do you know what? I am as well. And there's so many people that have been struggling recently. But the problem is, because we're business owners and we want to keep going and we need to keep pushing through, we don't like to say anything.
So you don't see that on social. People don't share their vulnerability on social. So you think everybody else is doing great, and you're the only one that's struggling in the background and finding it so hard to get clients through the door. But if you have this network of, like, we find your tribe, then you can have these conversations and see that you're not the only one that's struggling.
Yeah.
It's okay to take a break. You take a day off, the world still turning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was only in our previous jobs, if you took some time off or didn't do something, someone could potentially have died. But nowadays, like, you know, they're running the business now, that's not going to happen. So
Yeah. Well, that was what was like really interesting to me about your story was like you came, I guess like both of you guys in a way, but when you and I spoke last time, Laura, I remember thinking like you came from a career that I mean, is probably one of the most stressful jobs out there. Like being a police officer literally can sometimes be life or death situations. So to go from having that experience to now helping people who are burning out just by doing something that they're choosing to do must have been a really interesting kind of perspective shift for you.
yeah, it's so interesting because, you know, being in the police force, I think sometimes because you're doing shift work, and I was on what we call section, which means that you're on just normal response. So that could be like 999, or it would be 911 for you guys. And you don't really get a chance to process anything, because you could turn up to work and straight away you'll go into a domestic violence, and then you'll go into maybe a cop death, and then you'll go into a sudden death, and then you'll go into a burglary, and then you'll go into, you know, a public order incident. It's so varied, and you're constantly running on adrenaline, constantly, because you don't have a chance to settle down. So it's very much, that's the nature of the beast, definitely being in the police force. It is being, you are alert the whole time. And then you've got the whole added thing of shift work. Oh, you know, that completely screws up your system. But in the police, you could take time off. Like there were times, Kelsey, when I took 3 months off because I was having a really bad depression, or I was in a really bad mania where you know, it just wasn't safe for me to go in. And so I had those times where I could take that time, I could recover because I was in the police. Now, yes, there can be implications if you take too much sick time off, hence I was medically retired. But there is still that little bit of a fallback. Now, that doesn't stop you feeling guilty for taking time off, you know, because you still want to be there with your team. You don't want to let your team down. So there is that level of guilt. But there is that kind of little respite that, you know what, I'm not going in today. And I know even, I think about it with the business and I think, do you know what? If I was in the police, I'd probably take the day off today. Well, why can't I do that today? Or just reduce the workload or something like that. Um, I think actually my job was not as stressful as yours, but I mean, being in a prison, locked up with, I mean, I could not have done that.
The thing is, you couldn't walk away from the prisoners. If you had an altercation, things went a bit south, you still had to go back the next day and open that prisoner's door. That was probably the most stressful thing about being in the job. You still had to go back the next day, you still had a duty of care to look after the prisoner, and you still had to open that door, and you never ever know what's going to be coming at you when you open that door in the morning.
Yeah, it is. You are literally running on a cocktail of adrenaline and cortisol, and it's that is the thing that will burn out police officers, prison officers, because you're running on that adrenaline and shift work and everything.
Some people thrive on it, and some people really, really struggle to
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I can only imagine. I'm interested in hearing your guys' perspectives on like I feel like, especially now being so active on LinkedIn, I see a lot of people in the coaching space. Burnout is a very common word I hear about nowadays. I think there's a lot of coaches that focus on burnout. And I mean, rightfully so, there's a lot of demand for it. How do you guys, being that you do have a background of learning a lot about your own mental health, I guess, how do you guys kind of approach that? Like, where do you draw that line between somebody who's just burning out because they've maybe developed unhealthy habits around their business versus somebody that does need more mental health help?
I think the word mental health can be overused.
Yeah.
Some people are using burnout when they are just a little bit stressed. And we've got to see this a difference between we've got stress, we've got chronic stress, we've got real burnout is when your body goes no more, your mind goes no more, your emotions go no more. You cannot process anything. You basically go catatonic. And I think a lot of people out in the world are using the word burnout. We just feeling a little bit stressed at the moment, and I'm struggling to process information. So I would say, from that point of view, we've got to be really mindful about the words we use and the language we use.
I mean, yeah, I mean, what Baz says is completely valid.
Oh, thank you.
And burnout, if we look at it, I mean, I've heard some real horror stories, not mine to tell, but even with some of my clients, they've been in hospital, they've, suspected heart attacks, and their first thought is, I need to get this report in. Or, they've been in hospital because things have been wrong with their digestive issues. They haven't been able to speak or actually finish a sentence. They're really completely fried, for want of a better word. And so there are different levels of that. Now, when it comes to actual mental health, clinical mental health, like anything, a really bad depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, OCD, all these things, of course, they need to be looked at by a mental health professional. You have to stay in your lane and you have to know when somebody needs to go and see a doctor. Now, most people will come and see us because they've been to a doctor and they've had all the blood tests and they've been like, "You're fine." And they're like, "I really don't feel fine." And they'll want to put them on beta blockers, they want to put them on antidepressants, but they know within themselves something is not right. So that's when they'll come and have the conversation with us. Now, I will always say to one of my clients, I feel you might need some counselling here. Or I think it might be a good idea to just go and speak to the doctor and get this on record. So we have to respect that there are medical things that need to be done, but then there are lots we can do holistically with them. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And it reminded me of what you said before of like why you guys focus on entrepreneurs because I've had a long road of my mental health journey. I had an eating disorder for many years, and so I spent a lot of years in therapy just kind of learning how
Yeah.
to kind of rewire some of those thoughts that I had developed around just health and fitness and really life in general. But the last time that I went to see a therapist was a couple years ago. And I remember just feeling this like kind of dissatisfaction in, not that she wasn't trying and she was lovely to talk to, but I could tell that it's almost like I wanted to speak to somebody who understood how it felt to be an entrepreneur, because
Yes.
I just felt like there was a bit of a disconnect there. And I do think that being somebody who, has struggled with anxiety for as long as I can remember, I think a lot of people really carry that into entrepreneurship. I think
Yeah.
anxiety, especially, is very prevalent. I'm sure, other conditions as well. But I think for me, that's something I really struggle with in entrepreneurship, is that, like, preparing for the worst case scenario. Self doubt definitely creeps in, self comparison, stuff like that. And the last time, like I said, when I was speaking to a therapist, I found myself continually thinking that I was like, I wish I could speak to a therapist that was also an entrepreneur and just had
Yeah.
that bit of a perspective or insight into what it is like to feel like I'm responsible for my business. Like, I remember the last time we spoke, Laura, you said that, for you, sometimes a big win for your client is just saying, I went on vacation and I didn't feel like shit about it.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what? It's really interesting you bring that up because we're just speaking to a new client at the moment. And she was like, I was going to spend the money going to therapy for a year, but from everything you said, I feel like you really get what it's like to be an entrepreneur and a business owner. And I'd rather speak to somebody who gets that and be part of a group of people that have been in my situation. And I wouldn't say to her, don't go to therapy, you need to make that decision. Do you know what I mean? I can't say that. That's irresponsible of me. But I know that we've had clients as well saying they've been to CBT, psychotherapists, counselors, and it helped them in the short term. But what they loved about working with us is that, it was actionable, it was practical, and they also had the support from other people and us as well. So when we work with people one to one over the year, they see us once a month, they can come to the group calls every week, and they have us on a WhatsApp. So if we need to have another call, we will have another call. And so it's very much, we are very invested, in our people. But I would always say to somebody, I am an EFT practitioner. Baz and I are both control practitioners in terms of hypnosis. So we've seen a lot of people with a lot of mental health conditions, especially over the past 12 years and even before. And, you get quite good at picking up on, actually, this is a little bit, you need to go and get a little bit extra help.
I was going to touch base there. You said about seeing a lot of people with mental health issues, but the more people we speak to, it's nothing to do with the mental health. It's to do with emotion. And that is such a key point. So when we start to understand our emotions, we can start managing them better. Like, I hear a lot of people saying about anxiety, like you spoke about. Anxiety is there for a reason. And as soon as we start to understand what that information that our body's giving us, we get an anxious feeling, when we start to understand that, we can start saying, that's why it's doing that. And I'm not getting anxious about being anxious, and it starts escalating extra. We can keep a lid on it from about 1 or 2 out of 10. We don't let it go through the roof.
Yeah.
This is all about emotional health.
And
I'm so passionate about teaching people, what is our emotions? Why are they there? What is anxiety? What is depression? What is love? What is joy? What is pleasure? All of these emotions. That's what makes us human beings.
I
And
know.
if we try and fight those emotions and suppress those emotions, we become less human.
And I know for me, that's been a massive thing with the bipolar and the OCD and learning about my emotions. And it's one of the things we love to share the most with our clients. Like Barry says, anxiety, and anxiety is an emotion, and we need that emotion. And it's about tapping into that and, just understanding, well, what is it you're trying to tell me? And it's usually because we're trying to, tell us about something that's really important. Depression is usually because something didn't go the way we wanted it to. And that can sound like a knife to the heart sometimes. But when we start to look at it, we can see it. Anger, because you feel you've been wronged and you want that thing put right. So once we can start to understand our emotions a lot more, it can really help us to, have a more healthy relationship with them and actually feel, yeah, it does empower us. Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, I think that's what's really cool about the work that you guys do, is it's a lot about like not necessarily learning business tactics and like let's solve your business problems. It's learning about how to be a human who can just live day to day feeling the way you want to feel. And I don't know if this is the case over in the UK. I think that things are maybe starting to shift a little bit, but a topic that I've done a little bit of a deep dive into is the medical industry and the way that that as a business has shifted. Because I know for me, like when I was I think 18 and I first started going to my doctor saying like I'm feeling a lot of anxiety, I can't shut it off, I'm losing sleep at night, it felt like the go-to solution was let's put you on medication. And
Mm-hmm.
being 18, you know, when your doctor listens to you and then makes a suggestion, I just assumed like my doctor has my best interest at heart. And so I'm going to be 32 this year. I've been on those medications ever since. I've tried a couple times to wean myself off. Both of those ended up in me going back on it. And I'm honestly not proud to say that, but it makes me so interested in this topic of emotional health and emotional intelligence, because there's more to human beings than just a okay, you're dealing with this problem, here's your solution, we're going to put you on this medication, without really fully educating you on the long-term repercussions of it. So I think what you guys are touching on there, that there is a distinction between mental health and emotional health and just learning how to work with your brain and be a human being.
That's the thing that when we are looking at our emotional, it does take work, it does take effort, it does take energy, it does take time. And those things, I think we're losing the ability to do it these days because everything is so quick paced. We're looking for instant results. We're looking for instant gratification. Even now, I can pick up my phone, push one button, and I got dinner at my door in 20 minutes. And our human body is not like that. It takes a little bit of effort. It takes time to actually learn these processes, implement these processes, and change the cognitive process up in the brain.
I think it's a generational thing. It's interesting what you were saying about the doctors. There are some doctors that are brilliant, right? Who are very holistic. We have one in the UK called Rangan Chatterjee, and he talks.
Podcast.
Yeah, he's got a great podcast. He talks a lot about everything. And there are some doctors who will be very quick to here's this. You know, I have kidney disease from a bad case of me not taking me not eating or drinking when I was on lithium. And I had a text message the other day to say, would you like some statins? Because, you know, it's shown that, you know, it can help with
You're eligible to have statins.
Yeah, because of my kidney disease. And I'm like, why are we just sending this to people? But I do think that as we're going through the generations, we've got kind of a bit of a change happening where people are saying, actually, I don't want to take medication. I want to do this naturally. Like one of our clients, V, her resting heart rate was 99 beats a minute, just sat still. And so the doctor wanted to put her on beta blockers, and she was like, absolutely no way. We started working with her. Within a couple of months, heart rate's down to 69 beats a minute. You know, so, you know, you have to obviously weigh up. Yes, you know, we can't say don't go to the doctor. We can't say don't take the medication. But I do think that sometimes we need to look at our emotional, our mental, our physical health. We can't just take the pill. And I'm the same as you, Kelsey. I'm on medication, and I'm on medication for life because of the condition that I have. And I've had a lot of shame around that. Well, I'm a coach. I shouldn't be on medication. You know, I'm a fraud, that kind of thing. But what you got to remember is it's only part of who I am. It helps me be stable. I can't just then start going partying and eat what I want and, you know, working hard, because that won't support that. There are lots of different areas in your life. You can't just take a pill and everything is fine. You need to do the work as well in other areas to complement that almost.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We could go down a whole other rabbit
I
hole
know we
here,
could.
but I want to make sure I respect your guys' time. I wanted to bring it back briefly to burnout, because obviously you guys want your clients to come to you before they're at that catatonic state where just life is shutting down. So if somebody, say, is a couple years into entrepreneurship, and they're having some feelings coming up, like they're feeling lost, they're feeling confused, they're like, I don't even want to get up every day and work on my business anymore because I'm so overwhelmed. Like, what are some of those really early stages of burnout where like you would encourage people to, get help before it progresses to the point where they can't even make decisions?
And sometimes I'd love to say that we catch it beforehand, but 9 times out of 10, unfortunately, we don't. And sometimes we need to have a breakdown to have a breakthrough, and that might just be your path, right? And we have a little secret with me and Baz, little secret mission that we want all of our clients to say the best thing that ever happened to me was burnout. And we're on a good percentage rate right now. We're on it. But some of the things we need to be looking for are the kind of things where we are exhausted. We're starting to dread going into work. We've lost the passion for the thing that we loved. Our favorite client pops up and we're like, oh gosh, we're bursting into tears and feeling like we've got to put the face on, bursting into tears outside of Zoom, but putting the face on, in Zoom.
Very cynical to the world outside. Everyone's against you, and every situation is bad for you personally. Those are really sort of telltale signs that things are moving towards.
Yeah. Things where people are maybe saying to you, is that the only thing you talk about? Like your business? These sorts of things. If you feel like if you had a spare hour, oh, I could just do that thing or just do that thing. These are all kind of signs that something is creeping up. Headaches, upset stomachs, skin problems, all of these things that are starting to come up. Going to bed at night, not being able to sleep, racing mind. It's all of these things that start to build up, which could have the potential to, lead to burnout, spill over, mess, stuff that we don't want.
Right. Okay, understood. Okay, cool. Well, oh my gosh, I feel like I could ask you guys more questions, but I think this will, yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys for hopping on with me. If people are curious about working with you, or if they feel like they're starting to experience burnout, what is the best way to find you guys or to learn from you?
The best way for them to contact us would be if they've got LinkedIn, head over, come and find me, Laura Ash. I don't bite. We have a burnout self-assessment that you can take, and that burnout self-assessment will ask you 26 questions based on how you felt over the past 2 to 4 weeks.
I would highly recommend it.
We use it with our clients all the time. So many people say it's scarily accurate, and it will give you a detailed breakdown of mental, physical, and emotional burnout. So it will tell you where you're at right now. And then that will always lead you to, hey, just let's jump on a call, see if we can unpack it a little bit, see if we can help you, even if we do end up working together or we don't. The main thing is for us that you get some sort of level of help that you need right now, because we need your gifts in this life. We'll go back to the very beginning. You're important. Your business is important, right? So we need to be able to make sure that you can give back and do what you're meant to do within this world with whatever has been placed on your heart.
And it's just worth having a conversation. That's all it is have a conversation with us. Lots of
Nice. Awesome. Okay. I think that's a good note to end it on. I will plug your LinkedIn into the show notes, I think. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.